Daffney Moore, Cascade Media Group contributor. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am so excited because we're going to be talking about building tomorrow and urban planning, economic development, and community growth. And I have Troy with us, and I want Troy to introduce himself so we can get this conversation started.
Well, thank you, Daphne, for having me on. I appreciate the invite. Unexpected, but I do appreciate it. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Indio, California, just about 2 hours outside of LA, 2 hours outside of San Diego, and about 3.5 hours outside of Phoenix, Arizona. For those of you who are aware of the Coachella Fest, that is the city in which the Coachella Fest is hosted, the city of Indio. Kind of went through elementary, grade school. I played football, and I was able to get a college scholarship. And I went from junior college, which I played 2 seasons, and I transferred to the University of Idaho. That's where I played with, some NFL coaches who became NFL coaches. Unfortunately, I got injured my first season there, and so I transferred back home, and I finished up college at Cal State Northridge. I got my degree in social science. My emphasis was in Pan-African studies. I went to college really to play football. No idea, no intentions of graduating, and I knew I had to stay eligible. So as I got toward my junior year, I went to talk to my advisor, and I just want to know what classes I need to take. And I said, well, how many units do I need to graduate? See, I didn't even know how many units I needed to graduate. And so I asked that question, and she ran it down to me. I'm like, oh, that's when it first dawned on me that I could actually graduate. And so from that point on, I really put in the effort. And that was really stoked by taking classes in Pan-African studies, where I learned about our history, understanding myself, understanding our struggles. And from that point on, it was like I was dialed in. I finished up there, and I taught for about 7 years in Los Angeles. LA Unified School District is the second largest school district in the country. And I taught in some affluent areas, and I taught in areas that were disadvantaged.
Oh, wow.
And in doing that for 7 years, it really piqued my interest to understand the discrepancies or disparities in those communities where you have, say, a Woodland Hills or Sherman Oaks, where you have affluent area, and then you go into a South Central, Watts, Compton, where it was disadvantaged. And so I started asking questions to try to get an understanding of what causes these type of disparities. And a friend of mine told me, you ought to check into urban planning. So I did some research and found that that was something that I had an interest in. And so I enrolled at UCLA. I got my master's in urban planning. And from there, I worked at the City of Carson Redevelopment Agency. And then I moved back to Indio, in which I worked with the City of Indio Redevelopment Agency as a project manager, worked with the City of Desert Hot Springs as a project manager. I also worked in the private side with home builders such as Lennar Homes, a local or regional developer, Century Homes, in which I was a project manager. So I learned both sides of the table, understanding the private sector a little bit, as well as the public sector. And so that's kind of my background and who I am and how I got started with what I'm doing now. Currently, I'm the Planning and Public Works Director for Desert Recreation District, which is a recreational organization.
How big is that? Because that sounds like it's large.
You know, it's geographically, it's the largest recreation district in the state of California, geographically.
Wow. Okay.
Now, financially, that's another story.
Right.
But it's about 1,800 square miles.
Wow.
So we work in most of our facilities and parks are in unincorporated areas of the county, but we do partner with various cities to provide programming and maintenance for their parks and facilities.
That's really cool. You don't meet a lot of Black people who are the head of something like that because You just don't. So I'm lucky to know you, and I really want to talk about your experience in economic development and urban planning because most people don't know there's only 3% of Black people in urban planning. And
Yeah.
so that number may have went to 4, but it's still not a large number. And a lot of things that are going on in our communities and who is building our communities, really it makes a difference in the empathy and how we look at things. So can you talk about your experiences in actually building community and getting things to come to actually communities, because that is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. And it two things. It takes patience on the behalf of the elected officials to understand the long-term goal and vision. A lot of times they're more focused on the immediate benefits, and it compromises the long-term vision with little bits and pieces here. So learning how to satisfy the desires and needs of the elected officials, but staying focused on the long-term goals. Understanding your community, understanding the demographics, understanding the what type of infrastructure you have. So when you want to invite a developer or organization or businesses to your community, do you have the infrastructure to support it? Do you have the Wi-Fi capabilities? Do you have the appropriate power to power up a particular size building or facility, whether it be an Amazon? Do you have the workforce in which you can work in those particular industries that you're trying to attract? And so knowing your community in terms of your demographics and what you can go after. A specific example, when I was with the city of Indio, what we did as a way of attracting businesses is what we did is operating covenants. We knew that we weren't
Okay.
on the list of many different businesses to come here. We were in the enterprise zone, which is similar to the opportunity zone now. And we was also part of the enterprise. I can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me. But what we did is that when the businesses came and we reached out to them, they said, well, here's what I need in order from the city to come here. So a lot of it, we said, okay, well, we can't just give you 3, 4, 5, $10 million, but
Right.
what is the infrastructure cost for you to build your site and that you can be here? And so we would look at what that cost was, and then we would look at the benefits of how many jobs are being created. We look at the property tax valuations, we look at sales tax, and then we would make a determination whether or not we want this business there. If so, we would come up with an agreement that say we will share X amount or X% of sales tax with you over a period of time to where you can recoup your infrastructure costs and at the same time make it to where it's viable for you to be here. So we were sharing sales tax to really upstart our economic development.
That's smart. I know here in St. Louis and in our region, there's this big conversation of whether you should give tax abatement or TIF dollars or what type of incentives. And I think a lot of times people think it's easy, like, oh, don't give them any incentives or don't give them this. But when you're trying to compete with every community in the United States, you
Right.
have to figure out what that balance is. And I'm not sure if we've really figured that out, because now we've left a whole side of our community that hasn't gotten any incentives for the most part. And now they don't want to do incentives. And you can guess what part of town that
Yeah.
is.
And one of the things we started with was industrial. We say industrial companies, they don't necessarily are too picky about where they are, as long as they're in
Right.
a place where their cost is not too much, and then they're in a place where they're in proximity to places where they need to distribute their products. So that's where we started to begin to generate the sales tax to be able to put back into the city for other things like streets, parks, and other amenities that communities need.
Okay.
So that's where we started at.
Now, you mentioned city government and I'm going to go here because you used to be a council person. And
Yeah.
so you've been on the economic development, urban planning side, and then you were a council person. Can you kind of talk about that experience and how it kind of helped you see things differently while you were on the council and maybe made you be able to kind of empathize and relate and be able to talk to community about the needs within your community because you've been on both sides of it?
Yeah, as a council member, and teaching taught me this when I was a teacher, learning to be authentic because students saw through fake real quick. And so I couldn't tell you to do something and I turn around and do something different. So I had to govern myself and function accordingly so that people would adhere and respect what it is that I'm trying to do. So the same with the city council. I was authentic to who I am. This is who I am. This is what I do. And I have certain limitations, but I was always wanting to be transparent, open, and listening to the community as they provided input. I didn't always agree, but the fact that I would take the time to listen, try to get understanding, and say, okay, here's where we're at. I, I may not agree with this, but here's what I can do to possibly help you. And recommending them to certain resources or individuals that may be able to solve their issues, or just sometimes just listening and said, I can be here as an ear, but that's so far out of my scope at this point. There's nothing I can do.
Right.
I can be compassionate with you, and I can share when we're doing things, being open. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Here's the highs, here's the lows, the limitations, so that they're aware. A lot of times people get frustrated because their expectations are different than what you can really do for them. And when
Right.
you temper their expectations and letting them know what you're capable of doing or not, they're more understanding. They may not always be happy, but they respect that. So for me is really understanding the community, being open to listening and trying to help them solve problems. And the biggest thing is because I was from the community, I had a lot of real life experience in
Okay.
what they were feeling and experiencing.
So I have to sneak this question in. So we have Kamala Harris running for president, and last night she gave her accepted the nomination and gave her speech. And I, as a Californian, regardless of what party or whatever who you rock with, talk about the sense of pride and as her being from California and a little bit of your thoughts about last night.
I got in on the tail end of the speech, so I've
Okay.
still got to go back and watch it. The sense of pride, just having a Black woman in a position to be the president of the United States. From that standpoint, I'm prideful of. I also look at the policies and want to know what exactly. So saying the right things,
Of
um,
course.
the question comes down is, can those things actually happen? Because you rely on so many other people to be in step and in alignment with you to get those things done. I think when it first happened, I was a little kind of like, because when she first ran for president, I was like, something about her at that time. And maybe it
Right.
was just her trying to fill out and being what people or what she thought she needed to be. It didn't feel authentic to me, to be honest with you. And so I was a little like, but as I see and hear her now, I feel more of a presence. I feel that she can command the space. And so I know that that's what I'll be voting for.
Right. I'm gonna snap my
Yeah,
fingers on that one.
the other guy, I mean, I, I don't even need to talk about that. It's just
Right.
seeing what happened and what it appears the intentions are. It's hard for me to even consider that.
Right.
Um,
Agree. Agree. And I
yeah,
think you bring up a good point. I think that we don't realize how much media influences how we feel about someone, right? Because you hear so many things. Um, as a Black woman, you got to be all things to all people. If being our authentic selves can be hard, But
Right.
I do think that Kamala has found her space. And I think that she has also, the media has also shown her at her truest, right? Because a lot of times there's this something like, oh, she made us mad or she didn't do that. Like, it's like, is it true or is it someone who is just hating, right? Because there could be multiple things that are true at once. Or is it a scenario where the media is trying to paint a picture of her uh for their media likes and streaming and TV watching. So I really enjoyed her speech last night. And you can tell that she is from Oakland, California. You can tell that that Californian is in her and that the Black community is in her. A lot of people have different opinions, but you know when somebody has had your experience. And I
Right.
really do. I know that she has lived the Black experience. You can tell.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she's in a, Black sorority, went to a HBCU, so that experience, there's no question in that at all.
Right.
I know there's over the years a lot people people I've had conversations with, questioning as of being a attorney general and
Right.
some of the things that she had to do. I haven't looked deeply into that.
Right.
Because it's what it is. It's a job, and
Right.
if you on the wrong side of the law, then my job is to protect those who need to be
That's
protected.
it. That's it. Like,
And
people
so
don't understand that.
yeah,
People, I think sometimes when people who are looking on the outside, who've never been in leadership, who've never worked for government, like, you can't, while you can do a lot of things that you like to do, you just can't come up in there and say, oh, I ain't following none of the rules, because there is laws that are on the books of the state or the city that you live in. So you
right.
can't just ignore all of that stuff. And if you're a criminal, what's going to happen? What, 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen? But she did do a lot of great things. And I do think people need to really do their research
Right.
about what she walked into.
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, I know there's, how to say it, there is any competition, in terms of
Right, right.
who she's running against based on the views and the actions. Even if it was like we hadn't got a chance to see 4 years and his unwillingness to leave. That's the
That
part
part.
people like to say, nah, dude, because if you'd had 4 years, you figured some things out, another 4 years to really strategize. I don't see you leaving if you,
Yeah, the pandemic was enough for me.
yeah,
And then the comments of how he feels about women. Like, I don't understand how a woman can vote for that. And I don't see how people think that he's actually going to build community, to really help community grow. And as an urban planner, that our communities need a lot of work and a lot of help. And if you're really not focused on that, then you can't get much done.
yeah,
It takes a lot of work.
yeah. You definitely have to, even when you disagree or even if you don't like someone, you have to figure what are the common grounds to where we can make this happen that way. When we walk away from here, we both can walk away feeling like we got some results and there's going to be some benefits as a result of what we've done. So
Right. So you have worked on projects like Home Depot, Walmart, Target. Can you really talk about what it takes to bring those type of businesses into a community? Because those are not like, hey, we hanging around and we just gonna come to your city type of thing. Like, that takes real work.
yeah, that comes from laying the groundwork. Because before they came, it was about a 10-year or several years that we didn't have the rooftops, the population. So as our population grew, the type of individuals and families that were moving, more skills, higher educations that would attract certain businesses and also income. So those are things that when businesses like that are looking to come there, they're looking at, how much money, how much disposable income is in that community, what is the educational backgrounds, is that community growing?
Right.
What's the It's at, say, 50,000 now, but what is the capacity of that community to grow even more? So just laying the groundwork to be able to deal with education, providing the infrastructure. So when I build a 100,000 square foot facility, do I have the power? Do I have the water? Do I have all those things that are necessary for this building to function? And do I have the workforce that can come in here and do those jobs? So largely, it's just looking at where we're at, and from there, attracting what it is you are. You, like I say, you attract what you are, and that's true in this sense as well, because at one time we had a council member, before I was on the council, they wanted Nordstroms. And it's
Wow.
like, well, Nordstroms, we don't have the demographics to attract the Nordstroms. We don't have the income. We don't have the people who have that type of money that a Nordstrom would be willing to come here. And so we have to be realistic of who we are, and we build from there. At some point, we may build to that point where Nordstrom's, but at this point, we're not there. And with that, there comes a challenge when you get a Nordstrom's, meaning
Right.
that you have a more affluent population, which sometimes impacts and displaces that lower moderate income families that were there. If they don't own, if they're renting, the rents go up, property values go up, and they're often pushed out of the area and don't get a chance to benefit from all the growth and development that's occurring.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I think a lot of times you mentioned a lot of key things. Disadvantaged communities are disadvantaged for certain reasons.
Right.
Some of it's historical, some of it's money management, some of it's location, population loss. There are all these things. But as you're trying to rebuild community, trying to get those rooftops and income, like that's a real challenge to try to get industry into those communities. Can you talk a little bit about like how we can work toward that and just dealing with community that may not understand how you get to that next stage?
That's
I
a
know
tough
that's a big
question.
question, but I know
If
you
I
got it.
can answer that, I might go play the lottery today. Um, but it's a good question, and that's something I often think about: is how do you complement the two? How can we do it without displacing people, but also bringing people who are able to provide more resources, who are able to provide more skill sets in certain areas that are needed? How do we blend that?
Yeah.
And I think for us in California, we were doing it through redevelopment. Redevelopment agencies in California were eliminated in 2011, 2012.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they eliminated. So that kind of shifted my career and the way it has gone. But being able to provide resources for smaller developers, being able to provide training and skills for individuals to be able to increase their income and their ability to earn a living. Also, I would say creating more mixed income communities, mixed housing types.
Yes.
And in the suburb, what typically happen, they build these sprawling developments where only certain people have the ability to live there.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend of mine about that the other day. I said, because when you build projects and you build subdivision, projects are usually full of low income people who don't have the ability at that time to get out of that
Right.
situation. And the people that have the resources, the skill set to do so, they leave. And what's left behind are often those who are unable to get out of the situation. And so I will say this, and many people may disagree, but I think so-called desegregation had a negative impact on us.
Yes, it did.
There were some benefits from it, don't get me wrong, but I think when I look back, I don't know if the benefits outweigh the damage of losing institution, losing the community that was more in accord and in alignment with some of our goals and our agendas, and being able to put ourselves in a position to compete,
Right.
with other communities for resources, education, and building spaces for our kids and future generations to be successful in.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I actually wrote an essay in segregation by design, and I was like, you know, integrating really has not benefited Black people in the way that it should. And our communities were much stronger when we were mixed income communities. And there was just a being, an air about our communities. You knew everyone. Like I could tell you everybody on my block.
Right.
And maybe the blocks around me, down the street, and around the corner. So I definitely think that the Black community has lost a lot from separating. And I'm actually writing now about some of that and hope to share it one day soon about communities that I don't think we really know or understand our history and how strong our communities used to be. And that's why urban planning and economic development is so crucial to our communities. And I'm hoping that we can start to work to find solutions. So I want to talk about your personal life. You have all these things that you do, all these big jobs, these responsibilities. Like, how do you balance your personal and professional life? And I know you have a big family. And so, like, how does all that work?
That's tough. At different parts of my career, earlier on, when I have me and my wife, we have two older kids. Our oldest is 30, and our middle child, he's 20. He'll be 26 next month, and our youngest is just turned 15.
Wow.
And so earlier on, I was a little more energetic. I was a little more, can move. But my responsibilities at work wasn't as great as now when you're in a management leadership position to where you're responsible for so much. So you can get calls at any given time for whatever reason. And so balancing it out with our youngest has been a challenge. So for me, I realized that I need to take time to just get away, to re-energize. So I get up early. I get up about 4 in the morning. I meditate, and I study spiritual principles and just try to get myself focused for the day. This summer, we did a little more just getting away, taking time off to just relax. For me, it's important as I get older and I begin to look around and I'm like, it's a lot more time behind me than ahead of me. I want to enjoy life. I want to enjoy the next phase of it, and at the same time be productive and effective. So, just hanging out with family. The music is, I can sit down and listen to some music, and I become another person. And so, just finding those things about myself with family and taking time for myself, which up to probably the last, several months, I hadn't done because I'm always on the go. I'm always trying to help and, serve people. And I realize that I have to stop and make sure that I'm charged up so that I can be effective in serving people.
That makes a lot of sense. So my final question is, what nugget can you give communities who are struggling to rebuild? We have had a lot of ARPA dollars flowing through community, which has been great, and I hope some more flows, but maybe rethink who is flowing to, maybe not the cities as much. But how can we, what are your thoughts about how we help communities rebuild, especially those ones that have struggled for, decades to get there?
Ooh, that is that is a tough one because often it deals with time.
Yeah.
I think, and I look back when I grew up, I was like, my mom and them weren't as busy as we are. They didn't appear to be. I don't know. They might have been. I just didn't know it. But it just seems like you're all over the place and when taking your children places and involved in activities and the things that we do. I think being able to slow down enough and I think reconvene as communities,
Okay.
spend time with one another, because in spending time, you begin to talk and you begin to understand, okay, what's Daphne's needs? Oh, and now you have some ideas of what people are dealing with and going through. And that way you can begin to set up and establish ways to address those things. From a village standpoint, I look at it as how do we get the village back? because communities are really about the people. And I'll say this, I live in a great neighborhood, beautiful home, but it doesn't feel like the community that I grew up in.
Yeah.
It wasn't affluent. It wasn't anything, exciting in terms of how it looked. We had our issues, but I knew everyone. I had family around, and I always felt like I belonged. And I see that now as we begin to see our communities get dismantled, as many of us get pushed to the fringes and to the suburbs, our children, and my daughter in particular has suffered from being like not fitting in, not belonging,
Right.
not having that community and village. So from a social standpoint, I would say, how do we bring the village back? Let's look at recreating that village. From an economic standpoint, getting our educational skills, learning trades, and being able to provide value to where as opportunities come about, we can take advantage of them or able to create opportunities to make revenue and resources available to our community members, our family members, and those that we love. So those on a small scale,
But
obviously,
those are great ones. Those are
partnering
great.
with larger agencies, organizations to bring in certain businesses and certain business types that could, continue to spur the economic growth. So for me, it's really about building community, building the village. And I think that's what we've lost, unfortunately, in many of our communities.
I do agree. Well, I thank you for your time today. And I'm going to leave the audience with this. Our communities matter a lot. And just remember, conversations matter. So let's keep talking. Let's talk. Thank you.
All right.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.